I get asked all the time, what knives do I use most often? And today I'm out here hiking around in northern Michigan. I've got the 4 knives that I use most often today, and I'd like to just highlight them in this video. But as I'm walking around, I've made some discoveries, and this is why I love Michigan. Right here I have this is a dead birch, but this is covered with, stripped off some of this bark. The bark here is highly flammable. This stuff is fantastic, and in a cold climate like Michigan, you need to know your fire resources. What can you light up with your ferro rod very quickly? What tinders can you just take advantage of in nature? I always carry prepared tinder with my ferro rod, but I like to experiment with combinations and things in nature which I can use. And I know that birch bark, and this isn't a white birch, it's a silver, maybe a yellow birch, but you rough this up, hit it with a ferro rod, and the oils just take right off. And right next to it, this is what I love about Michigan, right here we have a balsam, and this stuff is loaded with pitch. These resin filled blisters, you can see that. These blisters are just filled with resin. Now that resin is a great fire starter, but you really do need to mix it with something, either cattailed fluff or any kind of cotton wool or anything. But right here, not 6 feet away from that balsam, is a cedar, and this is prime I'm just taking the outside layer of this with my machete. Now this cedar bark is prime stuff for lighting fires. If I just wanted to use it as a tinder bundle for a friction fire, that will be fine. Just rough it up as fine as I can get it. But because I have a ferro rod now, I've got a 1-stage fire because I love Michigan. I've got cedar right here and I've got balsam fir right there. I can use those blisters and make an A#1 fire lighter that'll take a spark and give me instant flame from my ferro rod. Now, I get asked all the time, what are the knives that I use most often? What blades do I prefer? What blades do I carry? I have a large knife collection, and I have a lot of different options to choose from. However, I find myself using the same 4 blades over and over again. It's just out of convenience, out of the way I like to work. I like to carry 1 blade for breaking things. That would be my machete. With the machete, I'm going to open up trails. When I get to where I'm going to camp, I'm going to clear a space for my hammock with the machete. I might build a tripod, harvest saplings. In the jungle, I'm cutting water vines and drinking all day long with the machete. The machete really is the master key to the jungle, and because I've had 15 years of jungle experience, that's just the way I like to work. The machete is what I use for breaking things. 1 knife for breaking things, 1 knife for making things. But basically what the machete is all about is tearing apart nature. I'm going to harvest raw materials with that machete. 15 years of jungle experience, that's just what I like to do. That's the way I like to work. Even in the summertime in North America, I'll most likely carry a machete. Now where that machete falls apart is in a place like this in wintertime in Michigan. It will never keep up with an axe and a bucksaw for creating firewood. Machetes are great tools, but they break down in the winter when you've got to produce an awful lot of just firewood. And in Michigan, traditionally the axe reigns supreme, and in all boreal forests you're going to find people using axes, not machetes, which is fine. It's the right tool for the job. However, it's the same concept. Is I have 1 tool for breaking nature, for attacking those natural materials and tearing things down and harvesting that. But now once I have those raw materials, I want to do something with them. I have other ideas in mind, like say I need to make a canoe paddle. Yeah, you can rough it out with the axe, but it's going to be an awful rough canoe paddle. All the different projects that I like to make with my knife, for that I'm going to use a bushcraft knife. Now I've graduated to using, a diving sparrow by Abe Elias, and it's a wonderful knife. For the longest time, I just carried a Mora in my pack, and that few ounces of Scandi Edge Wonder blade it always worked. It allows me to take the idea in my head and shape it with the raw materials. I prefer a Scandi edge for that because it allows very precise cutting. It works very easy. Now, where the Scandi edge falls apart is in all of your rough tasks. If you're cutting rope, like on Vancouver Island, I was using my Scandi edge knife to cut sandy rope, and it will dull and damage and chip that edge. It's a more fragile edge. That's why for all those tasks I use my neck knife, which has a convex edge, and it's a 1095 steel. It's not an expensive blade. I can get it razor sharp. It stays sharp, but it's easy to resharpen, and the convex edge handles all those brutal tasks, mundane cutting tasks. I don't worry about this knife. I will use it and abuse it, whereas I tend to treat my bushcraft knife as more of a scalpel. This is for those hard tasks. I very rarely, if ever, baton my Scandi edge knife. I've done it on video. You have videos on my channel even recently where I'm using it to do a limited batoning. But if I have my machete, that's the blade I'm going to use. This is designed to, I have seen a machete take a 25-degree set going through, beating this down through a piece of Candea wood. All of a sudden, bam, it takes this 25-degree set. You keep going and bang, it straightens right back out. The machete is a very inexpensive blade, and it will take that kind of abuse. So along with the idea of one knife for breaking things, I can also treat that knife very heavily. I don't have to pamper my machete. I will baton with it. I will do all those brutal tasks that I need to do. I will save my bushcraft scalpel for doing all the creative things I want to do and make out of the raw materials which I've harvested with my big brutal blade. Here in Michigan and in other places, especially in Brazil where we had a lot of bamboo, a saw, a small folding saw, is just wonderful stuff. You can get a lot more done with a saw than you can with an axe alone, like for felling trees around here. I would much prefer to use my silky saw for felling an 8-inch pine tree than to use an axe. I think it's a lot safer. It's just a better way of doing things. It's the thinking man's way of dropping trees. Especially in a situation where you are alone, then you can't afford to injure yourself. And the most dangerous thing in the forest right now is that 14-inch machete that I have. Fuzzing up this cedar, we're going to make some fire lighter with the balsam tree. This is what I love about Michigan though, is I've got a cedar tree right here, I've got a balsam right there. You shred this up, mix it with that, and poof, you've got instant fire. And if neither of these were here, I've got a birch right there, which is producing all kinds of shaggy bark. So Michigan's got fire resources just at your fingertips. I think this is just about ready. Now the fourth knife, which I always have on my person, is my Victorinox Farmer. Just a small Swiss Army knife. It's got the main blade, an excellent saw blade, and what I really like is the awl. The awl comes out the end of it. Some Swiss Army knives, the awl will come out of the side of the handle, which isn't as efficient. This allows you to work better. This does things like all of your small little projects. You can save a lot of time by using the saw to do your cuts, like notching a fireboard. It's easier just to saw through it. For drilling holes, you can do that with a bushcraft knife, but it's just a lot easier with this. Right now I'm going to use the awl to pop the blisters on this balsam fir and soak up the resin in our ball of cedar here to make my fire lighter. It's just I find I'm not a proponent of the one blade concept where you carry one knife and it does all your tasks and you can do small knife tasks with a big knife. Yes, but you always feel like you're pressing your big knife into service, doing things. They chop, yes, but do they chop as well as a machete? Absolutely not. You can do small detailed carving. Can you do it as well with a Swiss Army knife or a Scandi? No, you can't. And if I've seen on countless times teaching people how to use knives, they'll start out with their own knives and they'll say, hey, how about you try one of these, and I'll hand them the appropriate knife for the job. And all of a sudden the lights come on. Oh wow, that my one big knife, I can do it, but do I want to? No, you don't. At least that's my determination. I started out carrying a USMC K-bar in Pennsylvania, and that was the only knife I ever used. And when I moved to Brazil, I realized I had to have a machete. I couldn't work without it. And I ended up using that machete for everything. And that's where I came to the idea of, the one knife concept for me is not as efficient as carrying several knives, the right tool to do the job. This doesn't hurt the trees. Those blisters will heal up. You can see there I've got that resin soaked in. I just keep folding it in. Find a blister. Give it a squeeze. I wish I had a plastic bag to put this in. Yeah, fold of bark, that would work great. Just amazing how you have these two things growing right next to each other, and it's exactly what you need to make a ferro rod really work out here. Got enough here for several good fires. Just wrap that up in some birch bark. And that'll go in my pocket, no problem. Now, my neck knife is also my personal survival kit, and in here I have a BSA hot spark. Little tiny hot spark, and this is quite old and quite used, but I got some of that tinder I just made, and I carry prepared tinder in here. But why use that when I've got tinder I can prepare easily out of the area here? Just take a lump of this soaked with that resin. So that lights up right away. Now that right there is a fire making resource which I took advantage of. So just to sum it up, the 4 blades that I use all the time when I'm in the woods, given a preference, are going to be my machete, which I tear apart nature with, my neck knife, which is also my personal survival kit, and I use this for all the mundane cutting tasks. If I have to cut a salami or cut paracord, I'm going to use this. My Victorinox Swiss Army knife, which just speeds up all my creative little projects. It's just an easier way to do things, and it's not much of a weight penalty. And then last but not least is my Bushcraft knife. Sometimes it's a Mora, most of the time anymore it's my diving sparrow. If I had to get rid of either of them, well, if I had to get rid of take only one, it would be this one, and I would press this knife into service, especially if I had an axe and a saw like I did on Alone. I had this knife and an axe and a saw. I wasn't allowed to take, well, I was allowed to take the other knives, but they would have counted as towards my 10 items, so I didn't bother. I made this knife do things. And that's the concept I try and get away from in the bush, is making a tool do something it's not designed to do. I'd rather carry the right tool for the job, so I end up carrying 4 knives. I found these 4 knives work for just about everything I want to do. I've never found myself thinking, oh my goodness, I left such and such knife at home. When I have these 4, they do the job. The only thing I would augment these with on a regular basis is a folding saw. A lot of times I'll carry an open L folding saw, and it just makes life a lot easier to have that resource, that tool there. It's also the right tool for the job. So there you have it, my 4 knives.